Introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Eric. I'm the head of data at Primer. So Primer is a low-code solution for low-code automation platform for payments and commerce. So what's that mean? You've got an e-commerce site. You want to accept payments. You want to accept the most number of payment methods, so Apple Pay, Google Pay, from the most number of processors, such as Stripe, Klarna, Adyen, that you can. Well, if you want to integrate each of those by themselves, you've got to write some code to do it. If you use Primer, we do that one time. So you just learn our API and you can point and click and deploy new payment methods, new processors without writing any code. And you can also do automation. So for instance, if you see a payment for over €1,000, you can send it to a fraud detection service before you send it to a processor. And you can, again, do this without writing code.
So Aaron, so you can't say this obviously, but the analogy I had for your company was the segment of payment processors, really. So if you think about segment, what segment does, it receives events via different sources. It then potentially transforms them, and it then sends them to destinations. So is that an analogy that fits what you do?
Yeah, that's very similar, especially after the payment part, right? So once the payment's over, it's really not over. What if you want to send that to an accounting software, a BI tool, or something like that? So that part is very much analogous to a segment.
So the obvious question now is, where does Firebolt fit into this? Really, what is the problem it solves, and why Firebolt, and how does it fit into what you're doing?
Yeah, so the data team at Primer exists for what we call payment success. So essentially, we act on behalf of our merchants to improve their authorization rates and essentially make them more money. So one of the ways we do that is to provide an observability platform. So they can have really deep insights into their payments. So if they need to know which issuing banks are declining payments or where is fraud happening, we provide visibility into that, and the data is stored in Firebolt.
Okay, but why Firebolt though? Why particularly Firebolt?
Right, so we needed speed because it's customer facing. We started out using Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch is really great. But what you quickly find is you have different data sets and you need to join them together. So we started building these indices that were just massive. We're just combining all this data together, and it really didn't work well. What we found was we moved to Firebolt. We can still get the speed, but we get the elegance of the relational world, and we can just write SQL, which is, at the end of the day, really what I want to do instead of this JSON syntax that Elasticsearch provides.
Okay, so just to kind of summarize then for people, so what you've got here is a SaaS application, a SaaS service, where you are collecting in, so you're allowing your clients to collect in this payment data from, say, e-commerce sites. It then comes in and you do some transformation maybe. It then goes to these downstream destinations. And what Firebolt does then is allows them to actually kind of, I suppose, analyze that data so they can then, for example, maybe try and understand which banks or which kind of activities are leading to kind of payments not going through. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So, what they may find is for some reason in Germany, this processor isn't performing well. So what they can do is, with Primer, just route your payments to a different processor if they're coming in from Germany. And that's kind of what we can do. And we can literally turn payments from a cost center into a way to make money.
Okay.
We are introducing the concept of a payment retry. So that in that aspect, kind of, but I wouldn't consider us a mess. The first thing was learning about payments. So I have no payments experience. And coming into that world, I didn't realize all of the little nuance, such as issuing banks and how that can impact a payment. But I think like most data teams, what are some of the challenges we face? Data accuracy, that can always kind of slip through cracks. I think timeliness, right? We want data from the time payment's made. We want to be able to deliver that in the dashboard in under a second, right? And so doing that ETL job in real time is one of the challenges we face.
It's not so much in real time, is it? Is it more trends and?
Yeah. So we do that with, we have some models that as the payment is happening, we can figure out, hey, we think this is going to be declined. If we would do this to it, it may be accepted, but that's not really what Firebolt is doing. What we're doing is, exactly, longer term trends so that our merchants they know what to look at because we're curating these views for them, and they can have that insight without having their own. What we would do is allow you to bring in your own fraud detection service, such as Sift Science or something like that, and use our automation platform to say, hey, if a payment's for over €1,000, send it to a fraud detection service before you send it to the processor. So you don't have to write that code.
So fraud detection service we use Firebolt.
No, so I think what Firebolt does in this setup is it's fast slice and dice of the kind of like the large amount of payment data to understand after the event what was the pattern of transactions or things like that. Really, is that correct?
Yeah, that's
Right. So it's not so much the actual in the moment detection of fraud. It's about understand what's the volume of data you work with roughly.
We process tens of millions of payments a month. So.
Right. Okay. So maybe something interesting to me is, as a data team, what's your workflow like working with kind of like Firebolt? How does Firebolt fit into your modern data kind of workflow really?
Yeah, so everything sits on top of Kafka, and we use KSQLDB. So we are essentially doing any of our transformations at that level. So we'll write some SQL to join our data together. And the data is coming typically from CDC data. We use CockroachDB. We're hooked up to that in Kafka. We start joining data together. And then the last link of the puzzle is ingest it into Firebolt. So when it gets to Firebolt, it is completely ready to go for analysis. As I said, we started using Elasticsearch for this. And what we found is we have a lot of disparate data sets that really should be their own. And we were cramming them into their one Elasticsearch index. And modeling that became quite the pain. Scaling that in Elasticsearch wasn't easy. And what I really wanted to do was just allow people to write SQL to answer these questions. And that's what we could do with Firebolt. Give that speed as well as the relational benefits. As a customer-facing product, we can't have a 3-4 second delay when you try to move from 6 month to 12-month view. I need that instantly. And that's what we can get with Firebolt.
What BI tools do you use? I mean, I understand you use like Metabase, for example, someplace.
Yeah, so our observability platform is built on top of Cube. It's not just Cube, which is kind of an open source Looker. And so it's a headless BI tool. So we use that for customer facing. Internally, we use Metabase, and that's actually hooked up to both Firebolt and Snowflake. So we have schema validation at the Kafka level, and then we actually run tests before we start ingesting data. There are things such as, this may not make sense if you don't know payments, but like if a payment has been declined, it can't have an amount that's captured, right? So if you would ever see those two things, you would know, hey, I've got a problem. So we have a suite of tests that get run right before ingestion. So we started using Snowflake about 2 years ago as just our internal data warehouse.
How do you handle the relationship between the two? What does each role? What role does each one have? And do you try?
Yeah, so Snowflake is completely internal. If somebody, marketing wants to run a report or sales or something like that, it's going to go there.
So is there a point at which the volume of data really makes Firebolt pay off for you?
Sorry?
Is there a point at which the volume of data makes Firebolt the obvious choice for you, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially as we grow, it will become that. Like we do get some complaints internally from like CS, like, hey, this query is slow.
Right.
We don't see that with Firebolt.
Right. Okay.
Snowflake is a much more complete data warehouse system. There's no arguments about that. But for our specific customer-facing use case, Firebolt makes sense for us.
So it's not like I mean, I think there's sessions later on that we get into more of that, but it's not like it hasn't got its own dimensional model in there or cube or whatever. It's just a database, really. So is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we do model it. It's got schemas. We model everything essentially at the Kafka level.
It's a relational. So it's a relational database in that you have a fact table, a dimension table, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Aaron, thank you very much. That was a grilling, wasn't it?